Perfect. And here we go. So today for these workshops, we have the chance to have two people joining us today. We have Javier and David from NTT Data. So before talking about the project in details, can you maybe introduce yourself personally, a little bit of your background and experience in this field? We can start maybe with you, David.
Yes. So I'm my role at NTT Data is the digital identity and blockchain evangelist. So it's nothing to do with religion. It's just how we call it. It's basically helping our clients understand the technologies, because those are technologies that are quite new, quite recent. And so people usually need help understanding how they work and how they can make use of them in their particular projects. So my role is to make things clear to everybody, and then to also to design solutions that make use of those technologies or not, depending on the specific projects.
Awesome. And how about you, Javier?
I'm Javier David. I'm the executive manager for the blockchain and Web3 team. So I'm in charge of developing the service offering and getting projects so that David can use his skills in real life, as well as the rest of the team, of course.
Awesome, thank you. So I will let you present and share your screen, and I'm gonna go back in the shadow. If you have any questions, just ping me. I'm here for you.
Okay, thanks.
Wonderful.
So we're going to Javier, do you want to?
Sure. So we're going to have today our presentation / workshop. We'll try to make it as interactive as possible about decentralized digital identity. This is a topic where in the native crypto and blockchain world, maybe there is not so much talk about this, but on the corporate side and specifically in Europe, there's a lot going on here. So today we're going to share with you what is this about, and also how it relates to blockchain, and even some of the stuff you may have seen if you went to the Chainlink bootcamp. Although, as David was saying earlier, this does not always mean that we have a blockchain involved when we talk about decentralized digital identity. There are similar components and things that behave similarly on the tech stack side, and we're using similar things such as private, public keys, but on some aspects it can be different. And David will be going deeper into that in a bit. So I'm going to let him speak as he's our expert, and I will just complement what he's saying.
So what we're going to talk today is around five points. First is a look at what is digital identity today, what we did right, what we did wrong, and then part of what is coming up in terms of digitalization of identity. So first, decentralized identifiers, what they are, verifiable credentials. A topic that I think is very interesting is the comparison with NFTs, because they have very similar roles sometimes. And then, like Javier just said, what is how does blockchain come into all that? Okay. So first, identity. So is it possible to do digital and decentralized identity? I think it's a very important question. So why? Because I think we did it wrong the first time. So because first we had analog and decentralized identity, which we all know, which is paper-based identity, right? So for example, if I have a paper document or a plastic document, the person in front of me will do some face matching or name matching based on what the document said to make sure the document is really mine. I'm able to hand over documents to whoever I want. Anyone can be an issuer of a document, can be a holder or a verifier of documents. So everything is completely decentralized in the analog world. I'm not talking about technology here. I'm talking about the good old paper certification, letters, passports, and so on, the old way. So that was a decentralized way of working, mostly for technical limitations. So, but it was good in some way because we didn't have too much centralization at that level. And then we decided to go digital. So at first it was fine because we were like scanning PDFs and sharing and even printing PDFs and so on. So it was kind of a first step towards digitalization. And then we started filling up forms on HTTP, on the World Wide Web. And so everything was still decentralized, usernames and password on local servers and so on. So still fine. But then we started seeing a next step in digital identity, which is and should be perceived as an improvement, which is social networks, centralized login, my Google account or whatever. So login with name your favorite big corporation, can be TikTok account, GitHub, or whatever. And then that means we started centralizing things, and maybe that is not the right way. Maybe we made a mistake here. So maybe we can try again. So we already know how to scale stuff. We already know TCP/IP. We already know blockchain, HTTP. So we have a lot of decentralized protocol at hand. We know how to use them. We have a lot of experience, and so on. We also have asymmetric cryptography, so public and private keys. It works very well for companies. When you go to your bank account, the bank knows how to prove its own identity, and it's kind of decentralized. So it works. It doesn't work for people. It's very hard to have certificates for individuals. It kind of exists, but it's not very commonly used because it's not practical. So, and what is practical is OpenID-based protocols. So login with Facebook, login with something. So, but that is not decentralized. Not as much as it should. And we still have digital documents, but those are like semantics. So if I share PDF, it's fine, but it's nearly the same as sharing a piece of paper. So there's no structure. It's not easy for a machine to interpret that, to understand, to make use of that generally. So we kind of have a void there that can be filled. So the solution looks like a stack. So at the bottom of the stack, we have distributed anchors. So we all know, like, blockchain is a very good example of that. IPFS also. So decentralized truth record or support storage. On top of that, we have exchange protocols. So the distributed anchors respond to the question where do we put that information? How do we exchange all that information is the how, and what information do we want to share? So we have verifiable credentials. That says what we want to say about someone and who are we talking about, which is their decentralized, or which is their identifier. So we want all that to be decentralized. So decentralized identifiers, decentralized credentials, peer-to-peer or decentralized protocols. We don't want global API or anything like that. And we have decentralized storage. So if we use this kind of stack, then we're fine. Okay. So the first ingredient in that is, of course, the identifiers. So we already know what identifiers are. We are familiar with a lot of identifiers. An ID document, identity document, is an identifier. A phone number is an identifier, an email address. The VIN, the vehicle identification number of my car, is an identifier for that vehicle. It's not only for people. The barcode of a product, even a blockchain account and a public key are identifiers. Not all of those identifiers are decentralized. In fact, most aren't. So a public key is decentralized, a blockchain account also. An email address kind of is, but it still relies on DNS structure. So you still have a pyramid with the ICANN on top and TLD roots and so on. So it's not like if someone wants you to lose that identifier, someone will be able to, if it's someone who can, technically. So it's not completely yours. And a unique name, you could say it's a completely controlled identifier. The problem is, or even a UUID, a GUID, the problem is you can't really prove it's yours. So it kind of lacks a quality there. So we're left with a very, very few candidates. The problem is if you lose an identifier, you don't lose only the identifier, but probably everything that is attached to it. If I lose the control of my phone number, I will have many problems, not just the aesthetics of my phone number. Self-ownership is very, very important. And we kind of have a sense that cryptography is probably a key ingredient in that solution. Okay, so here we're talking about identifiers in the concept of identifier. And so we can start talking about a solution for that. So the people at W3C, which you probably already know, so they started working a few years back on a protocol which is called a specification that's called Decentralized Identifiers, DID. And so they didn't want to make any practical decision on what algorithm, what blockchain, what technical stack should be used. So they just defined semantics for identifiers. And they say, okay, so it's a URI. It should be a URI. So it starts with DID. So it's a new URI scheme. Then there's a method that describes the exact algorithm that you want to use, and it's none of our business. That's what they say. And then you can start coming up with many DID methods as you want: Bitcoin, Ethereum, IPFS, whatever you want to base your identifiers on. And then it's your responsibility to document that method. And then you should be able to represent a DID with a specific structure when you want to get information about the DID. So that's kind of a meta specification. It's a meta protocol. It's not really a protocol itself. It's more like a framework to make specifications. So let's say there's method 1, example method. So there's an identifier ABCD attached to it. And then the ID will be used to map basically public keys to an identifier. So basically, the ID is a glorified public key. It's just that it's a public key that has aliases on top of it. Okay. So you have an abstract identifier, and that abstract identifier can be mapped to one or several public keys, which allows for rotation of the keys, for example, or revocation. So you never lose your identifier if the DID method gives you that guarantee, which it should. And then you're free, as long as you're in control of your DID, you're free to rotate or to renew or to update the public keys attached or aliased or mapped to that identifier. So any claim that anyone made about you, they can make about your identifier. If you want to log into a system, you can log in with that identifier. And how you prove that you own that identifier will depend on the public key you want to use at that moment, and what keys are registered to that identifier. Okay, the registration itself is stored on a distributed anchor, depending on the choice made by the DID method. So, for example, a DID method that would be based on the Bitcoin blockchain, then the DID description, the mapping, DID and public keys will be stored somehow or would rely on the Bitcoin blockchain. Okay, and that's just one example. It could be any one you can think of, anything you can think of, sorry. Okay, so that's the technical view of, and a very abstract view of a decentralized identifier. Okay, so those are very important when you want to take part in a pattern of decentralized identity. Now let's talk about credentials. Now that we know who we are talking about, we want to start saying stuff about those entities, those people, or those organizations. So again, we already have verifiable credentials, just like identifiers. For example, a clearance letter is a kind of credential. Personal identification data, so your ID, an inspection certificate for a car, tracking information for jewelry or for consumption products. You want to be able to track them, so you have documents, diploma, of course. So those credentials apply to different kinds of subjects, not only individuals, can be organizations. And then, so those are the subjects of those credentials. And then on either side, you have issuers on one side and verifiers on the other side. So when you have a document, usually the person who wants to verify that document is probably not the same that issued it in the first place. For example, if you're controlled on the road by a police officer, they didn't make sure they didn't give you your driver's license. Someone else did. So they just want to check it. So you have trusted issuers. That can be anyone, public or private entities. For example, a university for a diploma, and then you have verifiers. That can be another university if you want to continue your studies in a different country or in a different university. It can be an employer if you want to show your diploma, and so on. So I won't go into all the combinations, but really we can see it's really a decentralized ecosystem. So we want to be able to do that digitally while maintaining the same level of decentralization. Okay. So a verifiable credential is transmitted from an issuer, as we saw, to a holder. So those documents are held by usually the subject that is mentioned in the credential. For example, if I get a prescription, the issuer is the doctor, and then a medical prescription, and then I will be the holder and probably also the subject. But maybe the subject can be my maid, but it can be my company or my car. So I will be the holder as a person, but then there will be a subject. That can be me or a different entity. There's the DID of the issuer. There's the DID of the subject, which is who are we talking about in that credential. The claims, of course, what are we saying? And then the proof, which is a digital signature to make sure that the content is not modified, because the content will be transmitted between an issuer and the holder. As soon as I have the credential in my possession on my mobile application, mobile wallet, I would be able to alter the content. So if there isn't an embedded proof in the credential, then it doesn't mean anything. I can change whatever I want because it's not a centralized API. So if I have the control, I need to be able to, the verifier will need to be able to verify that the content was not altered ever. Okay, so there's a proof. The whole credential is normally a digital file that is portable, that can be transmitted over the internet through issuance protocols, that can be held in a simple application, and then can be shared again to a verifier. Okay, so there's a second interaction between the holder and whatever verifier. If I get a diploma for a university, I get this issuance once, and then I will be able to present that credential along with any number of credentials I want to join to include to verifiers my whole life. So it's one issuance and probably many presentations. So presentation is just a kind of container encapsulation around several verifiable credentials. So there's a holder DID who expressed their consent. So this is signed as well, but by the holder. There is, of course, the set of credentials, a consent to use that can be expressed in different ways, and also a proof, just like for credentials. So there are protocols, standards that describe how the issuance should take place, how authentication of the holder should take place, so that the issuer knows who the subject is. So that is, of course, based on OAuth. And OpenID has extensions. OpenID, the series of protocols, has extensions for verifiable credentials issuance. And then same for presenting credentials from a holder to a verifier. We also make use of OpenID. So I'm leaving the names here of the protocols. You can look them up. All holders are compatible with verifiers, and all issuers are compatible with holders. So we're talking about interoperability here in data format and in communication protocols. Okay. So next step, sorry. So now the big question. VC or NFT? Because on social networks, essentially, for example, LinkedIn, where people are very passionate about this kind of topics, I often see many uses of NFTs that make me think we should probably be using a verifiable credential instead. So let's try to understand when to use which, because there's not one good and one bad solution, of course. It really depends on the application you want to make. Okay. So let's start comparing what VCs and NFTs are. I'm saying VCs for verifiable credentials. And then we can have a little game where we try to look at 4 different situations and see what we should use in that context. Sorry. So verifiable credentials says that someone, an issuer, says something about someone else. So, for example, a medical prescription, a doctor said something about a patient. So that is not the same as an NFT. An NFT says this thing, something, belongs to someone. So it's not the same. For example, a concert entrance can be seen as an NFT because maybe it can be sold or transferred to someone, but really it also says something about someone. It says that that person has the right to enter the concert hall. So you see that there's a very thin line between the two sometimes. The VC talks about any identified subject, so usually the ID. An NFT normally talks about the owner of the NFT, and normally that is a blockchain account. So blockchain account can be expressed as a DID if someone wants them to, but the opposite is not. It's not always true. And then the VCs are not transferable because they talk about someone in particular. So if I have a diploma, I cannot just give my diploma over to someone else. That doesn't work like that. And if it did, it would need to be issued again in favor of that new person, like a property title or something like that. The proof can be any proof for verifiable credential. Normally on an NFT, we leverage the blockchain's smart contract logic if there is one. So that's probably a better idea for NFTs. And the attributes are usually inside the verifiable credential for VCs, and the metadata of NFTs is often off-chain, although of course that can depend on the specific protocol you want to use. For ERC 721, for example, it's off-chain, but it really depends on what kind of NFT you're using. Okay, so now I'm going to stop sharing my screen, and I'm going to start sharing a different screen with a little game. So can you see it?
Yes, that's perfect.
Okay, so please scan the QR code or go to menti.com. I will wait for a few seconds. Enter the code 4793065, and we'll start in a few minutes. Okay, I already have people saying they're there. Great. So the idea, what we will be doing here is deciding what we want to do. Let's say we have some project, some application we want to develop. So we want to pick if we should be using NFTs or verifiable credentials, or maybe a combination of both, or maybe either. Maybe sometimes either is fine. So let's look at that choice. Okay. So we'll wait a few more seconds, and then we'll start, because we have a limited time, so I don't want to run too late later. What do you think? Should we start?
Yeah, let's start.
Okay, good. So good. We have 5 players here. I'm leaving the QR code just in case anyone wants to join during the game. So how should we model a driver's license? Should it be a verifiable credential, an NFT? Either is fine, or should we be using a combination of both? Okay, good. Everyone has voted. So yes, that's correct. It should be a verifiable credential. I would be interested in knowing who says it should be a combination. Maybe it's true, and I didn't see it. So we can have a discussion about it at any point. You can even reach me if you're interested in discussing about that. It shouldn't be an NFT because you can't transfer a driver's license. Okay. But you want to say things. For example, what kind of vehicle the person is allowed to drive, in what jurisdiction, in what geographies, and so on. So, and for until what date, and who said it. So all those are best expressed in a verifiable credential. Yes, let's continue with the second question. 7 people now, great. What about vehicle information? Can be accident record, owner, technical, repairs, and so on. Good. Okay, interesting. So it's true that an NFT could be used because you want to know the current owner. So it would be really great and cool to be able to transfer, like with a wallet, transfer your car to someone else. But it's not sufficient. How about accident record? How about the fact that it was properly reviewed by a technician, and so on? Okay, so in fact, you should be able to use both. Both can be useful and can even reference one another. So we will look into the details of that later. So it's not one or the other. It can be a powerful combination of the two. Okay, let's continue. So what about a boarding pass to onboard a flight? Interesting. So yeah, that should be, in my opinion, that should be a verifiable credential. There's no, I cannot think of a proper use for an NFT in there, because normally a boarding pass is directed to a specific person. You don't want to, the issuer is the one responsible of making sure that the passenger complies with certain rules, not the current owner. Okay, so I know that there are some NFTs that are not transferable or only once and so on. So but then we would be in the logic of verifiable credential, because you have an issuer who is trusted by verifiers, and then they will be saying that some passenger is fit to onboard that plane. Okay, so it's a claim. You're claiming something about someone. So the model is a verifiable credential. Maybe we can come up with objects that are the two at the same time, an NFT that is also a VC and reciprocally. But conceptually, it should be, the qualities we want here are those of a verifiable credential and not those of a token, a transmittable token. Last question. Oh, we lost someone. Let's start anyway. What about an art piece? Okay, person number 7 lost the connection maybe. Okay, So it's true that an art piece could be usefully represented as an NFT because it obviously has a current owner, and you obviously want it to be transferred at some point to someone else, or maybe not. If you really love it, you want to keep it until the end of your life. But it could be technically transferred. But it's also true that you want to be able to say useful things about that art piece, and it's critical. Let's say I go to OpenSea and I create an NFT for a piece of art that is not really mine. Then I can start scamming people and falsely claim that NFT represents a piece of art that it doesn't really represent. So we would be relying, so verifiers or users would be relying on OpenSea, which brings us to a centralized scheme. So the existence of centralized marketplaces tells a lot about a lack of functionality in NFTs, which is the verification of the information. Okay, so I think we could usefully combine the two. Okay, so we'll go into details of that in the next slide. So let's see what we have here. Okay, so TP, you know who you are, and you won the game. Then you have Tadeo, Thomas, and then I can't see the other ones, but you will recognize yourself. Okay, good. So thank you. Well done. I'll continue sharing the presentation I had before. Bear with me. And I think we are back on tracks. So let's talk about the last case. We can't go into details of all cases, but I think the last one is interesting. So an art piece, we want to be able to claim stuff about an identifiable object. So a VC can be useful, or maybe a set of VCs, each issued by a different entity. Maybe a museum or an art expert can issue something. The actual artist can issue another VC, and so on. So VCs there can be different VCs issued by different entities. That happens all the time. Even for a person, you have a diploma, you have medical prescriptions, you have an ID, you have a property title over a house, and so on. So there are different sources for what you want to say. So you end up with a collection of verifiable credentials. So each VC has an issuer. It says maybe something about the fact that it's a painting. So the VC talks about not the owner of the painting, but the painting itself. The painting is an object that can be identified. So we are saying this is a painting. It has this name. It's called Mona Lisa. It was created by Leonardo da Vinci and this date, and so on and so forth. So we have useful claims, and that we want to be verifiable about that painting. And then we have an NFT. An NFT because for obvious reasons, right? I think most people here are more familiar with NFTs than they are with VCs, so I won't go into too much detail. But what is interesting here is that one of the claims of the verifiable credential can be the URN or some kind of reference to the NFT that is tracking the property. This way we have a static set of information about the painting, but of course the owner cannot be a static piece of information. It would be too slow to update. And we want to benefit from the technology behind NFTs, but it's fine because we can always talk about the NFT itself. So we can say that for example, the museum can say, hey, this is the authentic Mona Lisa, and the current owner is in fact can be safely looked up in that NFT. And then we have the benefit of both worlds. Okay, and to a lesser extent, you might want to use the collection of verifiable credentials, which is a verifiable presentation. So it's a set of credentials as metadata for the NFT, since we already have URLs for metadata. So instead of having a flat JSON object, we can have maybe a verifiable presentation. So we still have a flat JSON object, but with signatures in them and so on. So it's very useful. Doesn't mean that nobody can change that URL. They can, so it's only for discovery, not for security. But if once you change it, you can have VCs that point back to the NFT. And the important part in those VCs is not really what they say, but who says it. So the issuer of those VCs. Okay. So I think we have a whole world ahead of us where we can kind of combine the two and get benefits from both things. Can it be, so I have York saying, can it be VC and NFT in one token? Maybe. So here we have, I think it wouldn't be maybe as useful because you can have several VCs. Several VCs can be useful and issued by different people. And the property is only one, the ownership is only one of the claims you want to make about something. For example, a piece of art, it's not only who owns it, it's also verifiable things you want, when what is created, who's the actual author, and the material. Maybe if it's diamond, it's important to have a certificate, not only who owns the diamond, where was it mined, and so on. So it could be fit. Maybe someone could come up with a new NFT format that can also work as a VC. So technically, yeah, nothing prevents it. I haven't seen it yet, but yeah, it could happen. Any more question? We're still good in terms of time. So I think Javier wants to say something. Roman? Yeah.
I disappeared after turning off my camera for a bit. No, I was just checking the questions on the chat. A while ago, Mariano asked which entity verifies the information and issues the DID. I think you already covered this, but maybe give a refresher just in case.
Which entity verifies the information and issues the DID? So there's in any verifiable credential, you always have an issuer, which is the entity that issues. Oh, okay. Sorry. Issues the DID. So the DID should be issued by normally by the user of the DID, because it's like a cryptocurrency address. You want to be responsible for your private keys. Otherwise, you might lose access to it. So DID, anyone could issue a DID for you. Maybe it can be more convenient, but you should make sure you trust them and that you will never lose access to your DID. So exactly the same discussion as for crypto addresses, crypto accounts. And so that's for the second part of the question. As for the first part, who verifies the information? Anyone can verify the information. Anyone who is presented with a verifiable credential can access the information, because the verifiable credentials are self-contained. You have everything in there. There's no API access. There's no permission to access anyone. If you get the VC, you can verify it. Okay.
To give an example here, imagine you have a VC that is your university degree. It would be initially issued by your university, who would have a DID on whichever database we are using for this. It could be a blockchain, it could be something else, but that's where the university would be identified, and that is how we could check that the verifiable credential is actually issued by them, because you could issue it yourself, but you would not be a trustful source or a trusted source for this information. So what gives this credibility is that you can check who emitted a verifiable credential. And then with that credential on your personal wallet, you could go to any employer, for example, and prove to them that you have your degree from the university, and they would be able to check that without having to talk to the university. They would just need to know whose or which is the DID of the university, and check that that is the DID that emitted your credential. And that way they would verify that information. It applies the same to anyone else who would like to check that.
Yeah. So we have other questions. Assuming VC moves from bank governments to Web3 entity, okay. Given that GDPR mandates the secure processing personal data, how is it managed to protect security and personal data? Okay. So anyone who receives a verifiable credential is responsible for it. It's like a picture or like a letter or any kind of private information. The law still applies. So the technology doesn't take care of that for you. you should also make sure that whatever you do is lawful. It's just like you spending Bitcoin. You cannot spend Bitcoin to buy whatever you want, but you should do that inside the frame of the law. So it's exactly the same for VCs. GDPR is an actual aspect that should be taken into account. That's the responsibility of the actors involved.
And to add on top of that, the current solutions we are developing using this technology, what they do is they store the personal information locally in your wallet. So it is not actually on the blockchain. On the blockchain, it's just that the ID and the verifiable credential is stored locally. So that information is not exposed. You will be the one in control of it, and you decide what you want to share when someone is asking for your credentials.
Exactly. So later on, we will talk a bit about blockchain, the role, the relationship with blockchain. Then we can talk about GDPR in more details there. So next question: how can this be applied to digital tickets and ticketing industry? Sky's the limit. You can use a combination of the two to any weight you can think of. A ticket can be a property. It depends really of what if it's transferable or not. It depends if you have a lot to say around that, or just if it's a pass to enter something. If it's just a token, then an NFT is fine. And if you want to claim things and it's important who says them, then you should involve a VC at some point. And it doesn't have to be one or the other. It can be a combination of the two. So really, if you have a project that needs to design this kind of solution, this is what architects are for. I'm talking about my profession here, but it's exactly an NTT Data. What we do is exactly that: is make recommendation of how you should properly use every technology for every project. There's no global response, global answer. Do I get a VC for my win learning when you use VC as an NFT? We have done that in the past, not for this workshop, but yes, you could perfectly. And in fact, it would be more properly. It would be better. Participations in workshops and so on, I think they should be represented as VCs, not NFTs, because you don't want to give your participation to someone else. You want to collect it, and it's yours, and your name is on it. So it's more VC. Problem is, VCs are not as fun as NFT at the moment. That's not a technical reason for making a technical decision. Okay, information, is it shared through zero knowledge proof? It can. So ZK proof, zero knowledge proofs, I will not do a presentation about that because it will require a few more hours. But ZK proofs can be inside a VC. So someone you have, let's say, a bank saying a lot of things about you. For example, how much money you have on your account, and you don't want to disclaim that information to anyone, but you want to disclose. But you want to show that you have more than a certain amount or less than a certain amount. So with zero knowledge proof, you can do that. Okay.
That was the last question so far. So we can finish with the presentation and then open it for more questions.
I agree with TP who says VC is more fun when it's a hackathon. That's true. Yeah, NFT are so mainstream now, so VCs are more fun. Okay, so let's continue. So blockchain. There's only one. It will be short. So it's everything is in there in the screen. So how can blockchain be used? So blockchain can be used for DIDs. So DID again is a mapping between. So it's an alias on top of a set of public keys. So you have several public keys because, for example, you have several mobile devices or several devices in general. And each one is responsible of its own private key. It's not exportable or anything like that. But it's fine because you have a single DID that is mapped to all those public keys. So it's good because you can have several keys. It's like SSH keys. You can have several SSH keys to log into a single system account. So it's very similar to that. So how could blockchain be useful in there? Well, we could have the registry of public keys and DIDs in blockchain. Okay, so that's one obvious use of blockchain for DIDs. There are two issues at the moment, mainly. There may be more, but one is GDPR, like someone mentioned before, because it's still not sure whether a DID should be seen, or a public key, for that matter, should be seen as private information. If I relate an opaque public key with a DID, that relationship will be stored forever on the blockchain. So what about my right to be forgotten? So the question boils down to whether a DID and a public key are private information, personally identifiable data. Okay, so since there's no consensus as of now, people want to be more like on the side of security and don't do anything that could not be undone, cannot be undone in the future, and stay safe and not use DID for individuals on the blockchain when GDPR is critical. However, companies are not concerned by GDPR in terms of their own protection of data. So company DID can perfectly be stored in the blockchain, no problem with GDPR. Okay. The other problem can be scalability, because you only have a certain number of transactions per second on the blockchain. So if you want to go crazy and create a lot of DIDs, maybe how does that scale? So it's the whole question of scalability in blockchain with higher level ledgers and so on. But technically, it could be it's a good use of DIDs. Then for verifiable credentials, normally you will not want to store a credential in the blockchain, at least if it's a blockchain that could become public at some point, which is a possibility for I personally think for any blockchain. Because you will never know. So I would discourage anyone from trying to store credentials, like literal credentials, on the blockchain. Although it can sound appealing, maybe I think it's not a good idea by default. And proofs, on the other hand, could be stored on the blockchain, like kind of timestamping proofs or stuff like that. And also related to that, revocation status. So you can issue a credential and embed the signature inside the JSON, for example, or CBOR package or whatever, and then you still leave a pointer to a blockchain, and you switch a bit to 1 when the credential should not be trusted anymore because it was revoked before its expiration date. So this way you can have more clever use of blockchain, because it will only be the scalability will be only limited by revocation actions, not issuance. And of course, there's much more issuance than revocation. So that could be a way to do it. Again, scalability, GDPR. At some point, we tried hashing credentials, like calculating a hash of a whole JSON object and put it in the blockchain. GDPR is like a gray area in terms of GDPR, because it's a hash. It's a big hash with a lot of salt, and it's very difficult to revert. But still, I had lengthful discussions with GDPR people about whether this is a good idea or not. So it's not critical to use blockchain for that. You can just store the mapping of keys and DIDs, or there are more smaller uses of blockchain that can be done. But it's still, I must say, it's still a work in progress. I think many blockchain labs around the world are scratching their head on this problem of how to make a good use of blockchain in digital identity. So I think this will be evolving very quickly in the future. And then we have trust. We didn't talk about trust, but how do I know as a verifier that a random DID that issued a credential should be trusted by me? So we're talking about the chain of trust here. For example, if I'm a pharmacy in Romania and someone comes with a prescription issued in Portugal, how does the pharmacy know that the doctor is legit? So can we use verifiable credentials, a chain of verifiable credentials? Should we use a blockchain, a smart contract to hold the trust, the chain of trust of all the issuers? So this is an interesting aspect also. So how to construct a useful chain of trust, and how can blockchain be used in there? So you can go look at the EBSI project, EBSI project for European projects. They have a proposal of that. You can also try to use verifiable credentials and like include them the whole chain when you think it's a good idea. For example, if you are going to the pharmacy next to your doctor, maybe you will not need to prove who the doctor is, but maybe if you go far, you will maybe provide their diploma or their doctor's certification, or even the fact that the certifier of that doctor is recognized by the Ministry of Health of your country and what country you're from and so on. So there's a whole chain. So it really depends on the situation, but credentials could be a good way to support that chain of trust. So I think we are kind of good. I'm seeing questions. Do we have time for a few more questions?
Yeah, we have a few more minutes. I saw this one from Giovanni.
Okay, maybe I got lost, but how does a VC differ from an SBT NFT? What's an SBT NFT? Can you...
Soulbound token, an NFT you cannot transfer.
Okay, so as I said before, so NFTs can be made transferable, but to me it means that there's a need for NFTs can be made to not be there. You cannot transfer them, right? That's what you're saying. Yeah,
that's it.
So, but it means there's a need for identify people inside a signed object. So maybe an SBT NFT can be a VC. It's not different. Maybe an SBT NFT can be both an NFT and a verifiable credential. So yeah, but it's a good question. Any other last question, maybe?
I didn't see anything else in the chat.
Okay.
We already answered some questions in the middle of your presentations, but yeah, I just wanted to share with you that the little game was really fun.
Okay.
It's really nice to make that some interactive games like that.
It was Javier's idea. Yeah, I agree. It was nice. I'm sorry it was very fast. I know that maybe many people got lost in the way. We only have 1 hour. We only had 1 hour. So I think please consider it not as a full training around verifiable credential and the IDs, but more like an introduction. And I encourage you to read on more about those topics. I think it's worth it.
Yeah, definitely. And this call was recorded, so you can still check that once again. And if you have any questions, just feel free to reach out to David or Javier. If you have any specific questions or ID, I'm sure that they will be happy to support you.
Exactly.
Precisely.
Cool, perfect. Anything else that you want to share, David or Javier?
No, I think it was good. I really liked the questions. I liked the audience was very nice on the chats, and so it was.
Just to give a point on the relevance of this, in particular in Europe, there's a regulation coming into effect in the middle of 2026, which will mean that every single company, especially banks or public entities, need to accept a digital credential on your side for your ID, for different types of credentials. So that means that at least in Europe, this is going to be very relevant. And on our side, we're working towards this quite intensely lately. So it's something that you will see a lot, at least around Europe, and we'll see when it expands outside.
Yeah, definitely. I'm in Switzerland, and I saw that some discussions around that are happening now in France and some other countries. So it's pretty exciting. So thanks again for your time, guys. For the people who check the records, you have Javier and David details here on the last page. Feel free to reach out to them. And
we are based geographically, since you're talking about France, I'm based in France, south of France, and Javier is based in Spain. But the company itself is present kind of everywhere. So feel free to reach to us. We can be present physically or virtually, depending on the situation.
Awesome. Thank you so much for your time, guys. And we will have another workshop in about 1 hour with Telefonica. So I hope to see some of you there. Thank you so much, guys. See you soon.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you. Bye.